This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nitahone, and it's Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. Lately, I've been looking at cards with specific stat lines, especially those that have slang terms based on the early days of Magic. For example, I've looked at Bears and Hill Giants, and today I'm continuing with Squires, in other words, 2-mana 1/2s. Like the other examples of this, the name comes from a vanilla creature from Magic's early days, in this case, Squire from the Dark. 2 mana for a 1/2 is not a good stat line, so creatures have to have some pretty sweet stuff going on in their text box to overcome that, since we tend to at least expect a 2/2, 2/1, or 1/3 for that amount of mana. When we looked at Hill Giants, that is 4 mana 3/3s, we saw that less than 10% of them have seen play. Squires do a little better than that, as 28 out of the 171 Squires that have so far been printed have seen play, which means about 17% of them have at least 1 point using my scoring system. In this video, we'll talk about the 10 Squires who have left the biggest impact on the game. Before we get started, a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A top 8 at a Players Tour, Pro Tour, Mythic Championship, Legacy Championship, or Vintage Championship is worth 2 points, and a Grand Prix or Magic Fest top 8 is worth 1 point. At number 10 it is a Tog, a 2 mana 1/2 that gets around its inefficient stat line by being able to drastically increase its stats, +2/+2 for every artifact you sacrifice. While a Tog is actually a very old card, dating all the way back to Antiquities, it only began seeing play after being reprinted in another artifact-heavy set, Mirrodin. That set not only came with a ton of artifacts and artifact synergies, but also artifact lands. Lands that counted towards all your artifact payoffs while also being capable of producing mana. This favored a creature like a Tog because it meant he could eat just about any permanent in your deck, since even your lands were artifacts. If an Atog attacked you, you pretty much had to block it or kill it, since if it went unblocked there was a good chance it could do lethal. It played this role in both Standard and Extended, and even made a single appearance in one of the earlier Affinity decks of Modern, Mono Red Affinity. However, it doesn't have any points since 2011, so its spot on this list may be in jeopardy. At number 9 it is Seeker's Squire, the only 2 mana 1/2 to make the list that has Squire in its name. This Squire overcomes its stat line by coming with one of my favorite recent mechanics, Explore. This means that the Squire will be one of two things when it comes down. It will draw you a card, or it will be a 2/3 that gives you a bit of card selection. 2 mana is a pretty good deal for either outcome, especially because it was usually played alongside Wild Growth Walker and Black-Green aggro decks in Standard, which made the Explore trigger even more valuable. So far, Seeker's Squire doesn't have any points outside of Standard. At number 8 it is Goblin Engineer, a 2 mana 1/2 that lets you tutor up an artifact and stick it in your graveyard. This effect can already be quite valuable in the right deck, but the Engineer synergizes well with it on its own, since you can use its activated ability to bring back an artifact with a converted mana cost 3 or less. Because the Engineer was printed in Modern Horizons, it was never legal in Standard, but it has gained enough points in other formats to make this list in spite of that. In Modern, it has been played in Wurza decks, which are more or less artifact toolbox decks that seek to eventually win the game using the Thopter Sword combo. The Engineer can help you assemble that combo or find any useful singleton artifacts you have in your deck that might be useful in a given situation. It is also played in Legacy, where it helps to assemble a different artifact-based combo, Painter's Servant and Grindstone. The Engineer seems well positioned to continue to put up points in both of those formats. At number 7 it is RAMOSIAN Lieutenant. This 1/2 overcomes its stats by being a rebel. In other words, it comes with the ability to recruit other rebels, since you can pay 4 mana and tap it to put a rebel with a converted mana cost of 3 or less directly into play from your library. This type of ability supplies some pretty impressive card advantage, especially because most of the other rebels all come with the same kind of ability, and in fact, the Lieutenant can grab the strongest rebel of them all, Lyn Civi Defiant Hero. Rebels were utterly broken in Block Constructed and completely dominated the Masks Block Pro Tour. Of the top 8 decks at the Masks Block Pro Tour in 2000, 6 of those decks were Rebel decks, and the other 2 were decks designed specifically to combat Rebels. That made for a fairly uninteresting format, and Wizards decided to ban Lyn Civi to weaken the deck, and it worked. RAMOSIAN Lieutenant has never gained any points after that Pro Tour. At number 6 it is Dwarven Miner. This 2 mana 1/2 comes with an activated ability that lets it blow up non-basic lands. Most of the time when we see an effect like this, the creature also has to be sacrificed, but not Dwarven Miner, who can do it once a turn. If you're blowing up a land every turn, your opponent is going to be in a lot of trouble, and it's also netting you some serious card advantage. In Block and Standard, the Miner was played in red aggro decks. In Extended, it was mostly relegated to the sideboard, where red decks could bring it in against many of the powerful lands in the format like Mishra's Factory and Kildoran Outpost. The Miner doesn't have any points since 2001. At number 5, it is Voyaging Satyr. This 2-mana 1/2 can untap lands, which goes a long way towards helping you ramp. This was especially powerful in Standard because Nykthos Shrine to Nyx powered Devotion decks were one of the most powerful decks around, and untapping Nykthos and getting to use its ability again could net you an absurd amount of mana. The Satyr was mostly played in Devotion to Green and Devotion to Selesnya decks. So far, it only has points in Block and Standard, but Green Devotion decks are seeing some play in Pioneer, and so is the Satyr as a result. It just doesn't have a top 8 yet. At number 4, it is Priest of Forgotten Gods, which is the newest card to make the list. The Priest has a powerful ability that forces your opponent to sacrifice a creature and lose life, while you draw a card and add 2 black mana to your mana pool. The cost for that ability is no joke. You have to sacrifice 2 other creatures, but that cost isn't as steep as it seems. The fact your opponent has to lose a creature and you net a card means you're actually breaking even with card advantage while netting mana and doing damage to your opponent. This gets even better in decks that are built to abuse Priest of Forgotten Gods that have lots of sacrifice fodder and sacrifice payoffs like Korvald and Mayhem Devil, and that gives you even more value out of the ability. In Standard, it has mostly been played in various sacrifice decks, namely Rakdos and Jund. It doesn't have points outside of Standard, but it still has more time in the format, so it may move up this list. At number 3, it is Goblin PILEDRIVER, who overcomes the mediocre base stats by being one of the best Goblin tribal payoffs ever. He gets +2/+0 for every attacking Goblin, and most of the time, there will be several other Goblins attacking with him. Protection from blue also means that he will be harder to block than normal, but generally, Goblin aggro decks across all formats could find ways to get blockers out of the way, and could attack with everything and kill someone very quickly, especially with a PILEDRIVER or 2 who are 7/2s. The PILEDRIVER has been a key card in Goblin decks in Block, Standard, Extended, and Legacy. It's worth noting that because PILEDRIVER received a reprint in Magic Origins, it is also legal in both Modern and Pioneer, and it wouldn't be too surprising for Goblin decks to make an appearance in either of those formats at some point, but for now, it doesn't have any points since 2012. At number 2, it is KITESAIL Freebooter, a 2-mana 1/2 that comes with flying and a hugely disruptive ability. Taking away your opponent's best non-creature, non-land card is awesome, and even if they have 2 removal spells and you can only grab one of them, you're still making your opponent use their removal on a 1/2, so it doesn't feel too bad, and that's pretty much the fail case. Normally, the Freebooter will cause your opponent more problems than that by derailing whatever their plans were. The Freebooter didn't actually put up any points in Standard, but it's been a key card in human decks in Modern. These decks are made up entirely of humans and human payoffs, and most of the humans also have some highly disruptive abilities, which lets you add to the board while making your opponent's life difficult. Disruptive humans, including the Freebooter and Meddling Mage, work pretty well together. The Freebooter gives you information about your opponent's hand, which you can then use when selecting what card to name with the Mage. Humans have been a Tier 1 deck in Modern since 2017, and that doesn't look like it will be changing anytime soon. The Freebooter did just receive a reprint in Core Set 2021, and it'll be interesting to see whether or not it gets played in Standard at all this time around. And at number 1, by more than 100 points, and probably not surprising anybody, it's STONEFORGE Mystic, a 2-mana 1/2 that tutors up an equipment and can also cheat them into play at a discount at instant speed. That's a ton of value for 2 mana, even on an underwhelming creature like a Squire. In general, the Mystic ends up being a 2-mana 1/2 that draws you one of the best cards in your deck every time you play it. The Mystic was a key card in many Standard decks. Many of those decks had the word Blade in their name because the deck could run equipment like Sword of Feast and Famine, which could be found by the Mystic. Despite the name, the deck more frequently searched up Batterskull, since getting it into play on turn 3 was a hard thing to contend with. The most famous or infamous of these decks was Caw-Blade, a deck so dominant it eventually got STONEFORGE Mystic banned in Standard. No matter the format for STONEFORGE Mystic, the Mystic most frequently finds itself searching up a sword, like Feast and Famine or Batterskull. While it was banned in Modern for 8 years, it was unbanned in 2019 and is seeing some play there now, both searching up powerful equipment to put on creatures, and Sword of the Meek to enable the Thopter Foundry Sword of the Meek combo. STONEFORGE Mystic is rapidly adding to its score and is still seeing a lot of play in multiple formats. Between that and the massive lead it has on the freebooter, it's hard to envision the Mystic ever falling off of this list. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to watch the other MTG Top 10s I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.